He didn't fail because he didn't know what to do. He failed because he couldn't make himself do it. Hey, to millions, Napoleon Hill was the man who unlocked the formula for success. And to others, he was a fraud who couldn't live his own advice. What's the truth? Well, it's a lot more complicated and a lot more human than you might think. And buried inside that truth is the one principle that made every other success strategy work then and now. Welcome back to the root of all success. I am the real Jason Duncan. And today I'm going to be diving into one of the most controversial and celebrated figures in the world of personal achievement, Napoleon Hill. I'm a big fan. I'm a Napoleon Hill certified leader. So that tells you where my bias is. I'm going to go ahead and let that go right here at the beginning. But you've probably read Think and Grow Rich, or at least you've heard about it. You may even teach his principles. But here's what most people never talk about. Napoleon Hill's greatest principle wasn't something that he mastered early. It was something that he struggled with his entire life. And that principle is self-discipline. And that's what I want to talk about in the show today. It's the one principle that made all of the others possible. And today, I'm going to share Hill's hidden battle with discipline, the moment that changed everything for him, and how it connects really to my own personal story. And I think that by the end of today's episode, you're going to see why you can't out-strategize a lack of self-discipline in business and life or in anything that matters. So let's go ahead and get into it. So Hill had access to power. He had access to influence, insights that most people would never even get close to. He spent decades in the company of men who built industries from scratch, not to flatter them, but to study them, to reverse engineer their results. And he taught that fear was a choice, that faith was a mindset, and that success, real success, which is what we talk about on the root of all success, he taught that real success wasn't random. It could be earned, it could be built, it could be repeated. And he became known for his frameworks, his laws, his ability to take the invisible and make it practical. And still, privately, he struggled. He was emotionally volatile. He was constantly chasing income because he couldn't manage the money that he had. He started big projects and then he left them unfinished. He made decisions out of fear, out of anger and ego, and he ended up paying the price for it. And in today's language, maybe we'd say anxiety or depression or drift, to use a word that he would use. And when it came to success, he didn't fail because he didn't know what to do. He failed because he couldn't make himself do it. He was a builder of frameworks and a breaker of patterns, and he didn't always live what he taught. And yet, what he taught still changed the world. Before Hill became the author of A Generation's Ambition, he really was just a man trying to win the war within himself. And in 1923, Hill was broke, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And now this was after the Carnegie Project that Andrew Carnegie had commissioned him to study the principles of success. It was actually 4 years after Carnegie died, nearly 20 years of interviews, thousands of pages of notes on success, and still he couldn't make it work for himself. He had no money in the bank, no job, no clear direction. And one afternoon he walked out of his little West Virginia cabin and he wandered up into the hills, and after hours of pacing and arguing with himself, he had a moment of clarity. And here's how he described it in one of his, what I believe, one of his best books called Outwitting the Devil. Here's what he said. And this is a long quote. I'm going to give it to you. He said, "You have been emotionally negative, cowardly, and lacking in self-discipline. From this moment forward, you shall be a different man. Your own thoughts have brought you here. Your own thoughts will carry you out." End quote. Now that voice wasn't Carnegie. It wasn't divine intervention. It was Hill finally telling himself the truth. Because, like I said, the problem wasn't what he didn't know. The problem was what he couldn't make himself do. And that was the turning point. The day he realized that the real enemy wasn't ignorance, it was lack of self-discipline. And after that moment, something shifted. And you can see it in his writing if you pay attention to how he wrote. In 1928's The Law of Success, self-discipline had its own chapter. It was lesson 11. And he called it the gatekeeper and the watchman at the door to your mind. And 9 years later, when he wrote Think and Grow Rich, there is no chapter called self-discipline, but it's everywhere. It's really everywhere. Persistence requires discipline. Organized planning requires discipline. Autosuggestion, sex transmutation, the subconscious mind, all of those principles he writes about in Think and Grow Rich are all powered by discipline. So by then, Hill had baked discipline into the operating system. It wasn't the frosting, it was the flour. And he even admitted, he said, quote, "I was good at beginning things. It was finishing them that nearly ruined me." And that's not the voice of someone who mastered success from the outside in. That's someone who humbled and then rebuilt himself from the inside out. Now, I've told parts of my story on this podcast before, but in 2010, I was an unemployed school teacher. I had a mortgage, a car payment, I had no plan B. And out of desperation, I started a business. And a few years later, I was a millionaire. But I lost most of it. Wrong partnerships, bad decisions. And if I'm honest, plenty of it was my fault too. And when I trace it back, every painful turn connects to one thing. It's a lack of self-discipline. I got distracted. I ignored systems. I let fear make the calls instead of principle. So I made a decision. No more split focus. No more scattered energy. I'm going to follow one course until successful. That's what focus stands for. Follow one course until successful. Focus. I came back from a conference in Wise, Virginia. Actually, Napoleon Hill's, stomping grounds as a kid. I came back from Wise, Virginia, from a Napoleon Hill conference in July of 2024. And I made a decision. I locked in on building my mastermind, the Exeter Club. That I wasn't going to chase other opportunities, no other businesses, no other investments. And within 6 months, my mastermind tripled in size. And not because of a marketing trick or gimmick, but because I finally practiced the thing I had been preaching, which is discipline. Now, I want to take a quick break here to thank our sponsor for today's episode before we continue this story. If you're still sending plain, boring follow-up emails, you are missing your chance to make real human connections with your prospects. Dub is one of my favorites. It lets you record and send personal video messages that land right in someone's inbox. It's easy. It's trackable. I can even see when people open it, how long they watch the video. And it works because people respond to people. They don't respond to templates. So I use Dub to keep my follow-ups memorable, my connections personal, and really it's been a game changer. I've been with Dub for a long time. And if you want to stand out in a crowded inbox, I want you to try Dub out. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/dub. That's spelled D-U-B-B. That's therealjasonduncan.com/DUBB. And you're going to get a discount. I think it's 50% off the first couple of months. You get a free trial. You're going to really thank me. So go check it out at therealjasonduncan.com/dub. All right, back to the show. So I had to make a decision about disciplining myself in the pursuit of my goals. And that's the same thing Hill discovered on that riverbank in Virginia. And the same thing, every one of us is going to have to rediscover maybe more than once. Because the war within yourself doesn't go away, but you get better at winning it. You get better not by adding more information, but by applying what you already know. With consistency, with clarity, with control. Because here's the thing, and mark this down. You can't out-strategize a lack of self-discipline. You can't out-strategize a lack of self-discipline. Not in business, not in marriage, not in health, not in anything that matters. It's what you make yourself do when nobody's watching that separates the dreamers from the doers. Because Hill didn't leave us a religion. He left us a framework. And the most important piece of that framework is discipline. I mean, he wasn't a prophet. He was a practitioner who happened to write it all down, of course. And we've got lots of books to show what he wrote down. And he was human. Like, we have to admit, he was inconsistent. He was impulsive. He was wrong sometimes. And I think that's what makes his work even more powerful, because he didn't write from the mountaintop. He wrote from the battlefield. He wrote as a man who knew what it was like to drift, to fail, to fall short of his own philosophy, and still keep coming back to one unshakable truth. If you want results, you need discipline. Not inspiration, not admiration, just discipline. And that's our job. Our job as leaders is not to, and as fans of Napoleon Hill, is not to protect his legacy, but to live it. Not to venerate the man, but to apply the method. And that same riverbank experience that he had is awaiting you. The riverbank that he stood on in 1923, that's not just history, it's a mirror. And every single one of us, you listening to this show, watching on YouTube, we're going to face our own version of that moment. And you might not be broke. You might not be pacing around a cabin in West Virginia, but you're going to come to a point, maybe more than once, where you have to choose between drift and direction, between motion and meaning, between knowing the way and then choosing to walk it. And when that moment comes, it won't be your talent that saves you. It won't be your education. It won't be your network. It won't be your ideas. It will be your discipline. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that's the real inheritance that Napoleon Hill left us. Not just a book, but a battle plan. Not just a philosophy, but a path to self-mastery. So if you remember nothing else from this episode, remember this. Success will never belong to the man or woman with the best ideas. It will always belong to the one who disciplines themselves to live those ideas out. Because you can be brilliant, you can be connected, you can be trained, but at the end of the day, you can't out-strategize a lack of self-discipline. Anything the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve with self-discipline. All right, you know what time it is. It's time for another edition of JD's Public Service Rants. This is the part of the show where I call out the little things that shouldn't have to be said, but clearly they do. So if you are guilty of this one, well, consider yourself officially put on notice. Hey, just because your vape smells like strawberries doesn't mean we want to breathe it. You're not misting the air. You're fogging the room like it's a club in 2005. If it's indoors and you're not alone, maybe hold off on the cloud show. This isn't your personal hookah lounge. And hey, self-discipline isn't just for business. Sometimes it's about resisting the urge to turn the break room into your own personal vape commercial. Well, that's it for today's JD's Public Service Rant. If you got an idea for one of these, send it over my way. And remember, don't be that guy. I want to thank you for tuning in to The Root of All Success today for this special solo episode where we take a peek into the underbelly of Napoleon Hill and what he really struggled with and how he really was able to push through and succeed. And it is in the key of self-discipline. Perhaps self-discipline is something you need help with. Perhaps self-discipline as an entrepreneur is something you struggle with. Well, send me a DM. Let's connect on Instagram at @TheRealJasonDuncan. Let me know how I can help you. I'd be honored to connect. Make sure you tune in again next time when I talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. Until then, remember, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Attention business owners. Attention business owners. Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. Cut your daily operations time in half. Improve your quality of life and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.